afternoon, everybody. I am Mako Hayashi Mayfield, a longtime member of ICL. I first heard the name Ranald MacDonald, not the hamburger clown, but the real MacDonald, from a friend who lives in Japan named Barry Duell. Barry was born in Salem, but has lived most of his life in Japan. He heard of him because in the 1990s and to early 2000s, Ranald was a popular subject on Japanese television documentaries. The Japanese public was interested in his story, and probably due to this book in Japanese. And you're welcome to take a copy of this book that's on the back table if there are still any left. But please leave the other books, only the pale blue book is up for grabs. The other ones are mine. So anyway, Barry also mentioned that there was a group in Oregon called Friends of MacDonald, but had no further information about it. Then when my husband and I were living in Japan in 2006, Barry invited us to a Tokyo bookstore where the author Frederick Schott was signing his book on Ranald called Native American in the Land of the Shogun. This is that book. So I have an autographed copy of this well-regarded biography. Thus my interest in Ranald was established, and I do have a small collection of biographies on Ranald that's on the back table there. Then in 2010, I fortuitously met Masaru Yatabe at the Japanese Consul General's residence at a celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Salem-Kawagoe Sister Cities relationship. He had become the president of Friends of MacDonald in 2008. So, of course, he asked if I had heard of Ranald, and he was surprised that I had. And I was happy to actually have found this group. The establishment of this group in 1988 is a very interesting story in itself. As I said, Yatabe has been the president of Friends of MacDonald since 2008 and has continued this self-imposed mission of the original founders of this organization to impart knowledge of this man's legacy to the rest of the world. Mr. Yatabe has been the driving force in promoting the connection between Rishiri Island and Oregon. In 2010, he established an educational exchange between high school students of Rishiri and Astoria due to Ranald MacDonald's historical significance in both places. Mas is the recipient of the 2023 Japan Foreign Minister's Commendation in recognition of his many achievements in promoting understanding between Japan and the U.S. Along with his wife Alice Yatabe, who I'm blocking, they will tell you about the life of this remarkable man, Ranald MacDonald, and of the Oregon organization Friends of MacDonald, which is dedicated to the dissemination of his story. Alice is the editor-historian of the organization's newsletter called Gates Ajar, and there are copies up here if you want to take one or two. This distinctive title comes from Ranald's own autobiography, where he wrote, quote, "I came thus to play my humble part in the drama of Gates Ajar, to west and east, in the world of the Pacific," end quote. Ranald MacDonald did achieve his goal of playing a significant role in the opening of Japan to the rest of the world. And now Mas and Alice will tell you how he did it. Please welcome them.
Thank you, Mako. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Masaru Yatabe, and Masaru meant superior or victor, winner. That's how my parents named me. It was 1944. Shortly before the end of World War II. So my classmates, there are many named Masaru or using the same Chinese character, victory. Nowadays, no such names among the little kids. And I brought this hat today. I don't know if you recognize or not. Yesterday, we went to bed very late because, LA and Toronto game lasted 18 innings, almost 6 hours, right? But I'm happy to wear for good working of Otani, Shohei, and a younger pitcher named Sasaki. Yeah, he's coming in as a closer. He couldn't quite close it, but anyway, I am the current chairman, president of FOM, Friends of MacDonald, which is a special committee of Clatsop County Historical Society based in Astoria, Oregon. And FOM, Friends of MacDonald, was established in 1988. Our major activities are publishing newsletter. I have 3 copies, 3 sets of copies of newsletter. Please pick it up. There are only 30 copies, so I don't know if it can be given to everyone. But we will be talking about history of FOM, Friends of MacDonald, primarily by my wife for 56 years. And and also we'll talk about what we have done as an organization. And as Marco mentioned, one of the main program is exchange. Well, not quite exchange, but anyway, there's a island called the Rishiri of Hokkaido, northern Japan island. And Rishiri Island is where Ranald landed when Japan was closed to the outside world, except very little trading with Dutch people in Nagasaki. Nagasaki is a southern island of called Kyushu in Japan. Japan is made up of 4 main islands, and it's not that large country, Oregon is bigger than Hokkaido and Honshu Island combined. But there are many people though. And we have students coming from Rishiri Island of Hokkaido every autumn to spend several days at the homes of Astoria students. And it's been going on with the exception of 2 years during COVID, but more than 10 years now. And it's been very successful program. And Marco introduced you this book, Festival of the Sea. It's a story about Ranald MacDonald in English, translated by Dr. Stephen Cole of University of Oregon. When Friends of MacDonald's had organized, Stephen Cole was a vice chairman of the Friends of MacDonald. But he's translated many Japanese books into English. That's his real job. And anyway, I brought about 20 copies. Whoever can pick up first, it's yours. And if you need more, I can get it from Clatsop County Historical Society. And as I introduced to you earlier, my wife, Alice, I've been a figurehead of Friends of MacDonald, but the historian and the editor of newsletter has been Alice. And it's much better for her to tell the story of Ranald MacDonald than I am. So I'm gonna give my microphone to Alice. Then please forgive her sitting down because anyway, yeah. She needs a walker to move around.
I will take this.
Okay.
So, let me ask you this. No, I'm talking to him now. No, nobody else needs to listen to that. Okay, what happened here? Yeah. I see. Yes, I will. No, I'm just wondering what happened here. Thank you. We all love computers, don't we? More than that, we all love Apple, or not Apple, but, well, maybe Apple too, but Microsoft updates. Yeah, that's how I feel too. Thank you, Mako, for the introduction. I could hear most of it. It seemed like this is what I'm going to read. This is what she told you guys. So it's going to be a little redundant, but that's okay. Let me see. Am I going this way? Ranald MacDonald. The book that Mako held up, Native American and the Land of the Shogun, the orange one there, was written by Frederick Schott. He grew up in Indonesia, in Japan. He is the manga king of the universe as far as both the Japanese public and the people here in America are concerned. He's won the Emperor's Award for interpersonal, intercultural, all things good between the two countries, Japan and America. This is part of the book that he had in there. He calls him a Pacific Rim adventurer, the Shogun's reluctant ambassador, American and world pioneer. All of those things are true. Ronald traveled extensively when there were no cars, there were no planes, there were horses, there were canoes, there were sailing ships, not even steamships. He visited North and South America, Hawaii, the South Pacific extensively. He was in Indonesia, Japan, of course, parts of China, parts of Australia, India, Africa, Italy, France, England, Canada, and of course the Pacific Northwest. I'm going to start reading from my script now. It's unusual for any country to honor the life and memory of a foreigner, but such affection is still felt in Japan for the man known as Japan's first English teacher. I'm going to halt there for a minute. The first English teacher, the first person who English was their native language to teach English in Japan. There were many translators in the Japanese government, but their basis was Dutch. We have a Dutch friend. He's impossible to understand when he speaks English. And when Ronald got there and was finally integrating with the translators from the shogunate's court, what he did mostly was not to teach them English so much as English conversation, English pronunciation, and he defined many terms that they had no idea what it was. I'm going to go forward. Okay, this back, forward. Here we go. This picture was taken about 3 years before he passed away. I think he was a good-looking guy. But he wasn't this guy. He wasn't that guy. We're going to go forward again. This is Fort Astoria as it would have looked in 1824. 1824 was when Ronald was born. After a childhood and youth which many would consider to have been full of adventure and excitement, Ranald MacDonald, the son of a fur trader and an indigenous woman, born in mid-19th century Oregon Territory, arrived in Japan when that nation was still in the midst of isolation, at a time when those in power had a well-developed mistrust for the foreigners who had wanted to open the doors and walls of Japan's self-imposed seclusion. Oh, I'm going backwards. You have to tell me when I do it the wrong way, okay? Archibald was his father. Archibald was a Hudson's Bay Company trader. His mother, Koalazoa, who was sometimes known as Princess Sunday or Princess Raven, was the daughter of Kamkamli, who was leader of the southern Chinookan people. Koalazoa died shortly after giving birth to Ronald in February of 1824. Archibald arranged for Koalazoa's sister, known as Ilchi, and you might have seen her statue at the statue of Ilchi along the Columbia River where Jake's Crab Shack used to be. It's really, really big. It's really, really beautiful. Guy did a good job. But anyway, Ilchi basically fostered Ronald in her father's Chinookan settlement, which was then known to the white people as Middle Village. Today, that village is located just west of the Magler-Astoria Bridge and is where the Chinook lived during spring and summer salmon runs. This is Kathlapodal Village, which is near present-day Ridgefield Wildlife Preserve. And it's on Ilwaco Bay. I don't know if any of you guys know where Ridgefield is. Yeah, this is what it would have looked like. It was full of people. It wasn't just, grass and whatever. It was full of people. Ronald grew up at various Hudson Bay Company forts. When he was around 2 years old, Archie settled at Fort Colville in the Oregon Territory with his new wife named Jane Klein. She was a 15-year-old Métis woman who had grown up on the fur trade frontier. During the years between 1825 and 1830, the family was at Kamloops, British Columbia, but Ronald was still with his Chinook relatives. He passed a considerable amount of his childhood with his native-speaking people. It was said that he was a favorite of his father, Chief Comley. In fact, when we were coming down here today, I noticed there's an overpass just north of the 45th parallel called Comley Road. Never been on it, don't know where it goes, but I just noticed the sign. There's also a city park in Scappoose that's Chief Comley Park. One of our kids lives in Scappoose. We go there often. I've never seen the park either. My bad. We need to do that. In the late 1820s, the whole family moved to Fort Langley on the northwest coast, where they stayed until about 1833, from time to time visiting Fort Vancouver, Fort Colville, and other places on the Columbia River. Generally, these travels were by canoe, but some were made on horseback. Yeah, I'm going to go back and forth on this because I'm not, okay, we'll go this way. This is Lower Columbia Chinook. You see how their heads are kind of pointy? They only did this with the ladies' heads. They thought it was beautiful. In the middle, there's a lady holding an infant, and it looks like this, right? They put the baby's head in there, and they didn't press it really, really hard, but they just, eventually that's how the head grew. And this is one of the canoes. It's, I think, made out of concrete. It's a recreation of, they had very, very large canoes. This is at Middle Village, across from Astoria on the Columbia River. This is Fort Vancouver, 1830 to 1850. It would have looked like this when Ranald lived there. I don't know that you can see the stockade, and do you see the stockade? Mount Hood, I can't see it from my angle. Kind of you can see it in the upper right-hand corner. Ronald would have looked at that every day that he was in Fort Vancouver, well, as long as it wasn't cloudy. He could have seen that every day. But only the officers and the factor and the bigwigs of the Hudson's Bay Company were the ones to live inside the stockade. So Ronald and his mother, who was part Assiniboia, I believe, and his half-siblings, and the Hawaiian workers, and the French trappers, and anybody else that wasn't a big cheese in the Hudson Bay Company lived outside it. They had farms, they had all sorts of things. It was a huge community. This picture is actually a rendition. It's a 1944 painting. It's called Chief Trader Archibald MacDonald Descending the Fraser, 1828. I don't know which one Archibald is, but this is how they traveled. If they went from Vancouver, BC over to St. Lawrence on the east coast of Canada, this is how they made it. This is how they did it. Whether you were old, young, crippled, happy, sad, this was your car. This is the cover of a book written by Jean Marie Cole. Jean Marie Cole was one of our charter members at Friends of MacDonald. She's the great granddaughter of Archibald. Her daughter, this is off subject a little bit, her daughter, Catherine Cole, works for the Canadian government to repatriate Native American goods, including bones, trinkets, clothing, anything you can think of that was taken by the white settlers back to their museums in Europe, in the East, in South America, wherever. Her job is to find those and repatriate them. She's very good at it. That's her mission. She loves it. Okay, when Ronald was about 9 or 10 years old, his father sent him and two of his younger half-brothers to the Red River settlement, which is just, you can see Lake Superior there. So part of the southern part would be Minnesota. The northern part, I guess, is what, Winnipeg? And he went by bateau, he went by canoe to do this, to go to school. He was at school at Fort Vancouver for a few months in 1833. I think that Archibald, who was really a stickler for education, wanted his children and his wife to be educated in a little bit more elite fashion. So he sent him to Red River. This is what Red River looked like then. It was actually tiny. Although I believe that the person who painted this probably didn't paint all of the people that lived around it. So, but I mean, this is a beautiful place to grow up. And Ronald didn't like it. He didn't like it there. He eventually, I think, spent maybe 3 years in high school. I don't know what the mandatory for high school for education was at that time. But he decided that that was not his thing. Now I'm going to get back to script here a little bit. Fort Vancouver. Fort Vancouver was filled with hundreds of fur traders, pioneers, missionaries, Native Americans. Fort Vancouver was a crossroads of culture that connected points as far away as Alaska and Chile, the east coast of the United States, Canada, the west coast to the Sandwich Islands, Hawaiian Islands. It would not have been unusual for the 9-year-old Ronald to see men from Hawaii and Ireland chatting together at the fort's bakery, or to watch Native American person interact with a French-Canadian trader at the blacksmith shop, each of them speaking their own language or a form of it. English was used for official records. Canadian French was used for by many of the employees. Gaelic was spoken by the Scottish traders, so there were a lot of Scotsmen that were sent over to operate this thing. Hawaiian was spoken by the Kanaka workers, and then various indigenous languages were spoken by the native people. That included Cree, Chehalis, Walla Walla, Kalapuya, Nisqually, Iroquois, of course, Chinook Wawa. Chinook Wawa was special because it was a pidgin language that put together all of the other ones together. English, indigenous, French, all of that stuff, and was used almost exclusively for trade along the Columbia Basin. And in a way, it's kind of sad because Chinook Wawa became the language of currency, but in the process, the Chinookan people lost their native language. It turned into this pidgin language, which, and this is also off subject, if you pick up one of the newsletters over there, there's an article in there about the Chinook Nation's endeavor to become recognized by the United States government. And the US government, one of their stipulations was, you have to prove to us you have a language. And they said, well, Chinook Wawa is taught at University of Oregon. If you want to take a second language, you can do that. I don't think that the lady does computer teaching, but I mean, if it weren't a language, it wouldn't be taught. So they're working with that. I'm going to go forward a little bit. Go back to script. This was Ronald's world. It wasn't hard to understand why, even as a boy and later as a young man, he would have been well acquainted with what is going on in the world simply by listening to gossip and stories he heard at the various forts he lived in. In fact, a few months after Ronald left Fort Vancouver for the Red River settlement, 3 Japanese castaways arrived at Fort Vancouver. They'd been blown across the Pacific Ocean on a small cargo boat. You might have heard of them. They're kind of known as the 3 Kichis. Ronald definitely heard story of these 3 men repeated throughout the Hudson's Bay Company trading empire. I mean, it was like not a scandal, but it was a breaking news, right? But this was not the first time a shipwreck had happened on the West Coast. It's entirely possible Ronald's interest in Japan might have been stimulated by that gossip about the sailors. whatever it was, eventually he came to believe that he had a racial affinity with the Japanese people and theorized they were the ancestors of North American Indians, a connection that further inspired his interest in Japan. During the 4 years he was at school at Red River Settlement, Archibald kind of tried to pick everybody's brain to figure out what his child was doing. Ronald just got tired of it. He said he called it the frustration of a dead-end job as a bank clerk when he was sent to apprentice to a bank. One of his dad's friends had a bank in St. Lawrence. Basically, when he was about 18 years old, he just packed up his rucksack and left. He went and signed on to a Mississippi paddle wheeler. And in and around Lake Erie and the Great Lakes, these boats traveled. He went all the way down to Louisiana from Minnesota on the Mississippi River. Eventually, working as a deckhand on one of those vessels, he made his way up along the eastern seaboard to New York City, where he shipped out on a ship called Tuscany, which was bound for London. Sorry. Ronald roamed the globe for a few years as an ordinary seaman before the mast, always seeking an opportunity to get within striking distance of Japan. He soon figured out that whaling ships were the best way to do this, since they pretty much just prowled the high seas looking for whales to kill. Okay, just a minute. Now I have to, we didn't plan this stuff. Do you want me to go into this? Okay, go into it? All right. Let me see what's up next. During these years, actually starting in around 1605, and this we're talking now about mid-1800, 1850, during this time Japan was in the midst of what is known as sakoku. It's a policy of carefully controlled international contact. It wasn't even easy to get into Japan legally, let alone illegally. By now, Ranald MacDonald wanted very much to go to Japan, to learn about it, to teach the Japanese people about the Western world. At that time, MacDonald had already established quite a reputation as a sailor and a navigator, and the desire to secure his services was said to have excited so much competition between shipmasters. He finally decided to join the whaler Plymouth out of Sag Harbor, and in 1845 signed the shipping articles under the following conditions. He would stay with the ship until her cargo was completed, and when she was ready to leave the whaling grounds, when they were done killing the whales and melting the blubber and stripping the baleen, when all of that was finished, when she was ready to leave the whaling grounds in the Sea of Japan on her homeward passage, he would ask for his discharge at any time he might desire. And it was also agreed that the captain would furnish, in exchange for what would have been Ronald's share of profit, a boat and whatever other provisions he might require. It was also here, and MacDonald wrote this, that he made a bargain with the captain to be taught how to navigate, how to use a Halley's quadrant, and a nautical almanac. Captain Edwards of the Plymouth reluctantly agreed, assuming that he'd never have to do that because he figured Ronald would never be able to carry out that plan. This is Lahaina. In the old days, if you've ever been to Lahaina on Maui and you had shrimp at Bubba Gump's, and you're looking, what direction then would that be? North to Lanai. This is the bay. At times there were between 150, 170 whale ships just anchored there. Whaling was big business in and around the Hawaiian Islands too, not just in the North Pacific, not just in the North Atlantic. Okay, let me see where we're going here. I'm going to do this again. Okay, we're not ready for that, but we'll just listen to this. Records show And all of these ships kept records. And when the sea captains left Honolulu or Lahaina or Hilo, they had to write down, it's like customs. They had to write down who was on board, where they were going, what they were going to do. When they got back, they had to write down who was on board, what they had done, how, successful had they been, what were they going to do. So there are records showing the Plymouth arrived in Lahaina in Maui in 1846 after a journey of 5.5 months. It cleared Cape Horn, the southernmost headland of Tierra del Fuego archipelago of southern Chile, surrounded by wild, treacherous seas where the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans meet. Then crossed over the Pacific after following the west coast of Chile. At Lahaina, the Plymouth was not alone. In 1846, there were 429 ships docked there in this. Yeah, it looks like it could be. The vast majority of these ships were from the east coast of the United States, either headed out or returning from the whaling grounds of Japan. There were lots and lots of whales in Japan. Most of the whales they found were in the Sea of Japan. Now, you couldn't land on Japan, but you could get in the water there, and they couldn't do anything about that. So I'm going to quote directly from Fred Schott's book, Native American in the Land of the Shogun, that Mako had. MacDonald's narrative, which was what they called his autobiography, makes it sound as though he left the Plymouth upon arriving in the Hawaiian Islands and signed up again when it was sometime later, yet this is highly misleading, as the preposterous idea that he applied for reshipment after a sojourn of a few days was unrealistic. In local Hawaiian newspapers at the time, the Plymouth recorded as arriving in Lahaina on May 17, 1846, and not departing for Japan until November 11, 1847. That's like 18 months, right? Not a couple of days. In the meantime, the Plymouth was out whaling in the Pacific and the Northwest and regularly laying over in Hawaii. The question here was MacDonald on the ship or not? One article in the Honolulu newspaper called The Friend suggests that he was. The paper's editor, who interviewed MacDonald's crewmates, unambiguously described him as being on board. After remaining with this vessel for 2 years, while at Lahaina in late fall 1847, he requested his discharge unless Captain Edwards would consent to leave him the next season in Japan. So I'm done fooling around with you. I'll find another way to do this if you're not going to, play with me here. It is also clear from MacDonald's own words that Ronald spent a considerable amount of his time in Hawaii preparing for his adventure, gathering information, reading books, gathering the gear he would need, as this adventure could hardly be planned on the fly. I mean, he'd been thinking about it since he was maybe 10 years old. So, he was into this. In a letter written toward the end of his life, he states that, quote, "From the time I made the bargain, I considered I was fairly launched in the enterprise, although I had brooded over the matter for years." So he wasn't going to be dissuaded. This is where he wanted to go. There's Japan. Nagasaki's in the south. You want to go show them? Tokyo is probably just about where the word Japan is, maybe a little bit south of that. Do you think? We don't have a laser printer. And this is what he's asking for. Hokkaido is the island at the way north. Those are the gray ones. Of course, the yellow parts, that's Russia. And where Hokkaido goes up to a point and Russia comes down as a point, that's Sakhalin Island. Okay, you have to understand that American whalers in the early to mid-19th century were only increasing in number. No less than Herman Melville himself in his famous novel Moby Dick, which was published in 1851, had said the following: If that double-bolted land, Japan, is ever to become hospitable, it is the whale ship alone to whom the credit will be due, for already she is on the threshold. Okay, you can point those out. Nagasaki in the south. There we go.
Nagasaki is here. This is the Kyushu Island. And
Wait. Where's Tokyo?
Tokyo's right here.
Down that far. Okay. This is important to know later. In about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Okay. And then Hokkaido.
They don't know. Here is my home. And, this is Sapporo, Portland's sister city. Number one sister city relation in the world. Reader's Digest praised the sister city.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Reader's Digest praised the relationship between Portland and Sapporo to be the exemplary and the number one sister cities in the world. Yeah.
Sure.
And this little island right here, that is Rishiri Island. That's where Ronald landed. And
Stay there.
we have,
Here's Hokkaido. Where's Rishiri Island?
oh, Rishiri Island. This is the bigger one of the two. This is Rishiri Island.
The northern island is what?
This is Hokkaido.
No. The north of Rishiri.
This
that
is
one.
called Rebun.
Those islands are about 6 miles apart. So when you're standing on one, you can see the other one really easily.
And I think here, this is a town called Wakkanai. And that Wakkanai town is about 45th parallel. So
Just like Salem.
Salem must be around here, right? But it's very cold here.
So just out of curiosity on that map, can you see Yagishiri?
Hmm?
Can you see Yagishiri on that map? Does it show
Yagishiri?
where it is?
No, but maybe this one.
Those little islands right there. That's about, where he's pointing is another little set of islands about 50 miles south of Rishiri. We're going to be talking about that too. Okay, here we go. That's an even more of a close-up.
Oh, Rebun Island and the Rishiri Island. Rishiri Island is the one that for the last dozen years or so, students come to Astoria High School and homestay for several days. And there are 2 towns on Rishiri Island, and they finance the students to come over here.
Are we running out of time, Mako?
Yeah, no, it's okay. Wait.
5 minutes? Okay. Okay, we're gonna rush through this next little part. Okay, so as far as whaling is concerned, it wasn't just American whalers. It was the British, the Russians, the French, Norwegians, Iceland were appearing in Japanese waters with more and more frequency. And regardless of the Japanese laws surrounding national seclusion, Japan couldn't legislate away the fact that these foreign ships were coming in greater numbers, a trend that was only to grow with the increase of steamship traffic. And there was a distinct school of thought in some circles of Japanese political leadership that there should be some kind of adaptation of the seclusion laws, at the very least in the interest of improving Japan's capability to defend itself against potential foreign aggression. Russia was already an aggressor. And I'm going to skip. Oh, well, I won't. The House of Date of the Sendai domain, which is northern Honshu Island, was the largest domain in northern Japan during the Edo period and was prominent advocate of the opening of Japan, being tasked with the coast defense duty in Ezochi, which is their word for Hokkaido. The troops regularly encountered Russian warships, not whale ships, but Russian warships. You want me to go back? How far back? There you go.
Anyway, this is Rishiri Island, and there was the office in Hokkaido, Tokugawa Shogunate's office in
Matsumae.
Matsumae.
Right there. You almost hit it.
Matsumae is around
Yeah,
here.
yes.
Right. And that's where Ronald, he spent, I think, 10 days
10 days.
with
Microphone.
a native called Ainu. Yeah, spent Ainu. But it took 10 days for the office to find out the foreigners on the island. So they came, and then he was arrested. And then he was sent by boat all the way on the Japan Sea of Japan side, to Nagasaki. And that's where Tokugawa Shogunate's, all the, though limited, dealing with the foreign country was done. There was an island, small island, man-made island called Dejima. That's where,
You're getting ahead of yourself.
well,
I'll let you talk about that when we're in Dejima.
all right.
And it's time for a break now? Time for questions. Are there questions? Here, you need to give them the microphone. Oh, we got lots of microphones. Oh, yeah.
Hi, I'm Dean. I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit more about Ronald, in the sense that we still don't know who the heck he is. He's a whaler, obviously, and he lived in Japan, but we don't have an understanding of who he is and why we should revere him and why he's so revered.
We will get to that, but have you ever watched the movie Forrest Gump? Ronald, I think, was the original Forrest Gump. He is in every picture of every place with every famous person doing every famous thing that you can think of. That's my impression of who Ranald MacDonald was. Ranald MacDonald was half indigenous, half Scottish. He grew up on the fur trapping frontier. He traveled between Fort Vancouver in Vancouver, Washington, to BC, to Winnipeg, to St. Lawrence, to all of those other places that he was an adventurer. I don't know what else you would call him. He liked to mine for gold. He, we'll get into it a little bit, but I mean, he was an entrepreneur. He didn't work for anybody. He did his thing. He was with a group that went to Vancouver Island, the original exploration group that the King of England sent to Vancouver Island. He was there as a geologist, as a botanist, as a map maker. He did everything. I truly think this man was brilliant. He spoke, I'm sure, I was counting one day, probably at least between 9 and 12 languages. Maybe not super fluently, maybe not eloquently, but he could communicate with just about anybody. Well, yeah, no, he circumvented the globe more than once. When you stop and think about it, we take things like that for granted, sort of, until we go and see, what Lufthansa is charging for plane tickets. I'm not going to circumvent the globe. I mean, you can't do that. But here, where no cars, it's like Gilligan's Island: no cars, no boats, no motor, no radios, no telephones, nothing. But he did all of it, and he did keep records of what he did. Unfortunately, they were lost. He managed to save, out of all of the records that he made in Japan, only 10 pages. survived. He was in a shipwreck going between Australia and India, and everything he had sank. He said he had his stuff in a little handkerchief, and that was all he had.
We have another question.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Do you have a Sharon Johnson, do you have a exhibit in the Astoria Heritage Museum? If you don't, you should. You'd fit right in.
We used to have Friends of MacDonald when it was new and shiny and everything. Used to have almost one room devoted to Ranald MacDonald. And then Goonies happened. And I mean, Astoria, just like any place, is tourist-based. And, when you attract people to your town and they go and they eat, food is great there. Seafood is wonderful in Astoria. They have a maritime museum. They have cruise ships that dock there in the port. The Heritage Museum is wonderful. The Flavel House is wonderful. But they packed all his stuff up and put it away. Let me think what I was going to say. Up in Republic, Washington, which is, I don't know if you guys know the geography of Washington, but Republic is probably about 20 miles from the Canadian border in the middle of the state. And about 12 miles from there is where Ranald was buried. Oh, you got it. Great. Cool, honey. Okay, yeah.
Take a look at. When you have a chance, please take a look at the pictures of Ronald's grave,
Right. Anyway,
which is
we'll get-
right now the smallest state park of Washington.
That's great. The town of Republic, Washington is where the Ferry County Historical Society is. And they have their an original home that was there. So it's like 120 years old. And they have extensive Ranald MacDonald memorabilia there, including handwriting, letters that he wrote, maps that he did, whatever he did. If you guys, it's not that far a drive, but I think it's going to be an overnighter if you want to go up there. But I think it's worth it. I think it's well worth it.
And I told you about high school students coming from Rishiri Island. They always bring a rock from the a beach where Ranald landed to, what do you say, to the graveside. Yeah. Whoever the student comes, they put the name and the date, and so that we could place at Ranald's gravesite. This year,
Going to take a break. We're all old. We have to pee.
Okay, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll be back. Thank you. Please come up and check out the displays.
May I have your attention, please? It's time to start up again. But before we let Alice take the mic again, I just wanted to mention this little book called Capital Names, Individuals Woven into Oregon's History by Phil Cogswell. Now, Phil is here today. I know he was here the first half. He said he was going to plug his parking meter. And I think he hasn't come back in yet, but he wrote this. He was a reporter for the Oregonian many years ago, and so he spent a lot of time in the Capitol, and he made a list of all 158 people who are mentioned on the friezes in the Capitol building. And Ranald MacDonald's name is on one of those friezes, so you might make it part of your Capitol journey to find out where it is. And here we go back to Ranald MacDonald's story.
Okay, I'm back. One of the questions I want to start with was who was Ranald MacDonald, really? Who was he? And a number of explanations were offered to me. The one that I liked best was Renaissance man. I think we could all agree that he was that. But when I was doing research for this, there is a website, a blog page belonging to, the age of our grandkids now. And they did a short expose of Ranald MacDonald, and they called him an alt person, or an alt, A-L-T, alt. That's the jargon of the 20-somethings now. And it means, it's short for the word alternative. And it's often used to describe individuals who embrace an alternative lifestyle, alternative fashion, alternative subculture, or that is different from mainstream or conventional norms. And I think he definitely fit that definition. He was his own man. He had his own ideas, and he was willing to go through just about anything to accomplish what he wanted to accomplish. I have respect for that. I do have respect for that. Okay, we're on page 8 of 23 pages, and I've got 45 minutes left, so probably I'm going to cut some of this stuff short. All right. On June 27th, 1848, the Plymouth, Ranald's whale ship. I'm not going to be able to keep calling him Ranald. Just that's the Scottish pronunciation. It was fully loaded with whale oil and baleen. And as a side note, when the Plymouth got back to Lahaina and went through their idea of what customs were at Lahaina, it had more oil, more baleen, more stuff than any other ship had ever gathered before that one voyage, which is interesting only from the perspective that nobody was assured a wage. You signed on, you did what you were told to do. When we get back to port, if we haven't been lucky, you might get $1 or $2 maybe for what you did. This was the biggest haul that any whale ship had ever made. And Ranald would have been quite wealthy if the captain were honest, right? You know, sometimes they weren't. But he would have been very, very wealthy. And he gave all of that up for a little kind of leaky whale boat, and the ability to leave that whale ship when he wanted to. Okay, here we go. So in 1848, the Plymouth, fully loaded with whale oil and baleen, was off the northwest coast of western Hokkaido. Oh, we're not back there. Do you want to go back with your pointer, honey? Huh? Yeah, okay. They were off the northwest coast of western Hokkaido and headed east for the Soya Strait. See where the Soya Strait is in the middle? That's right in the middle between Hokkaido and Sakhalin. There you go. Yeah, that's the door. That's the in and out of the northern Sea of Japan. That's the only way that ships could go. They could go up into the Sea of Okhotsk. They couldn't get out up there. It was a bay. It wasn't a, you know.
I think we pronounce it Okhotsk.
Okhotsk. You do? Okay, that's good. We can do it your way. Oh, there's the Sea of Okhotsk. Anyway, the Soya Strait was how they got in and out of it. And so the ship was poised to go into the Soya Strait to get into the Western Pacific.
Sea of Japan.
No, they were leaving the Sea of Japan.
I see.
They were leaving the
way.
Sea of Japan to
Right.
go in there. And, that was the day MacDonald told the captain it's time for him to leave. He wants to get off the boat. And he put all of his belongings, clothes, supplies in a little whaleboat, was dropped off, headed in the direction of Hokkaido, hoping for the best. I don't know if they could have seen Hokkaido from the ship. It's very possible because I understand that strait has all sorts of underwater rocks. I mean, it's all volcanic stuff. There's peaks and valleys and all different kinds. They have to be really, really, really careful when they go through that. On that day, and this was told to the Friend newspaper in Lahaina, one of Ranald's crewmates had described him as a man of about 5'7" tall, thick set, straight hair and dark complexion, a good sailor, well educated, a firm mind, well calculated for the adventure upon which he embarked. No one can blame Captain Edwards for leaving the man in such a manner, for he advised him until the boat was launched over the side not to do it. But no, Mac's mind was not going to be changed. Moss and I have friends in Rishiri. Moss talked about the Rishiri student program where they send people back and forth. The Rishiri Island is where Ronald finally went face to face with Ainu Japanese. But there are people who think that Ronald, Captain, or that the Plymouth let him off farther, much farther south than that. And, you know, longitude, latitude, it's easy to go and look at a captain's rudder to see exactly where they were. And I think that there's kind of a little competition in Japan going on as to, oh, it was my island he landed on, not yours, my island. And there's a couple of little islands called Yagishiri. They even have an Indian totem pole as part of their display that this is where Ranald MacDonald landed. It's not even big enough to be on that map. And Yagishiri Island was about 47 miles south of Rishiri. That's like between here and Portland. And in the book, Ronald said, well, I could see the island that I was going to head for. You can't see 47 miles away. You can't do it. And we had a friend living on Rishiri that took out a boat similar to the whale boat, got in it, tried to row himself from Yagishiri to Rishiri, and he didn't make it. He didn't die or drown or anything, but he didn't make it. It was impossible. The man who used to be curator of the Rishiri Museum, which had a really good display of Ranald MacDonald stuff, and Chinook stuff, and Ainu stuff, he and I have had a lot of discussions about, I think, that MacDonald landed on Rayboon, which is the little island up to the north of it. Right, honey, you want to point it out? Which one is Rayboon? You don't want to do that? Yeah, Rayboon. And went the 6 miles to Rishiri. This is what Mount Rishiri looks like from Rayboon Island. A little bit like Mount Hood. This is what it looked like probably that morning that he tried to get his boat over there. We took this picture from the ferry that goes between Hokkaido and Rishiri. It's not very inviting, really, I think. What? Okay, faster? Okay, I'm sorry. Anyway, this is a daguerreotype. It was kind of a form of a camera kind of thing. This is what he would have looked like and not with the suit and the tie and stuff, but this is what he looked like then. This is Rishiri Island. There's Notsuka Cove where he landed. See it? Okay. Logistically, there's no way that he landed anywhere else. These are the Ainu, or a depiction of the Ainu that would have met him on Rishiri when he came. He said when he was approaching Rishiri Island, there was a boat coming towards him that had people in it. And they intercepted him. He pulled the plug on the bottom of his boat, swamped it. He was like floundering. They not these exact people, but you know, they came, they saved him, they put him on their ship, they towed his boat back to the shore. He had lost most of his stuff in there. Didn't have any shoes. Somebody took their thongs off and gave him those shoes to walk up the rocky beach. treated him beautifully. There may not have been any verbal communication, but I think there were good feelings all around. This is Notsuka Cove. That's Moss. The gentleman he's with is the man who was the curator of Rishiri Museum. His name is Eiji Nishia. But that's what it looks like, and that's what it looked like when they brought him to shore on Rishiri.
Rishiri Island doesn't have any sandy beach. Yeah, they're all rocky beaches. And they produce the best kombu.
The best kombu. Oh my gosh. Yep. The very, very best.
Kombu will be in English.
Kombu is kelp.
Kelp. Yeah, kelp for cooking. Yeah, that's the best.
And it's delicious. And when we ask for souvenirs, that's what we ask for. Okay, so they took him, they gave him dry clothes, they fed him food, they prepared him for what was going to happen next. The authorities came over from the island of Hokkaido and took him into custody, and he was taken to Nagasaki, where at the time it was the only place that the shogun allowed foreigners to be. They even, in fact, did a kind of a landfill project and made a handmade island, and that's where the foreigners were. And it had a gate on it, and you didn't come out of that gate. That's your spot. That's your place. MacDonald reported later that everything about him seemed to excite the curiosity of the Japanese. Where he came from, the size of the United States, its physical aspects, and they asked about all of his effects. They noticed he had a lot of books. They assumed he was a scholar because of that. And while he was in custody, he said that all sorts of people came and just stared at him. He made the comment, he didn't think his appearance was that different than a Japanese person. And if you look at many Native Americans, you can see that there's definitely Asian background, for sure. And he couldn't understand why they wanted to come, but he thought maybe because he had a beard, but they knew he was a foreigner, and so they were really, really, really curious. He was under house arrest for several months. Although pleasantly, courteously, well-treated, he was given very little freedom. One of his students, and his students, quote, unquote, students, were Dutch interpreters for the Japanese government. And it was kind of a familial thing for them. Their dads had been Dutch interpreters, so they inherited this thing. And there was one specifically who MacDonald thought was probably more intelligent than the other ones. His name was Einosuke?
Moriyama.
Moriyama.
Moriyama Einosuke. Yeah. His father was interpreter, also professional interpreter for Dutch language. So Moriyama Einosuke, when he was 3 years old, he spoke fluent Dutch.
Okay.
And at that time, English language was really important for the Tokugawa Shogunate. And that's where Ranald came in. So, and also, unlike other whaling vessel sailors who were drunk oftentimes and so forth, but Ranald was very gentle and gentlemanly. That's why he was not put in a jail. He was a house arrest. And the Tokugawa Shogunate decided to have professional interpreters of Dutch to commute to Ronald's jail cell to learn English,
Microphone.
mainly English conversation from him. And one of the best student became very good interpreter. So a few years later, Commodore Perry with a black ship came, and then he became Tokugawa Shogunate's official interpreter. And then he did the same thing for in Tokugawa's negotiation with Russia, England, France, and Tokugawa Shogunate. After that, made trade agreements and so forth with all Western nations. But Moriyama, the best student of Ranald MacDonald, became the number one interpreter for all. So he was so busy, and
Let's go.
there was a demand by young leaders of Japan at that time to learn English from Moriyama, but he didn't have time.
Okay, back to the story. This is a landing monument. This is right above the beach on Notsuka Cove where Ronald's boat was towed, where he landed. This is on Rishiri Island. Are you going to say something?
What's
Okay.
inscribed here is a portion of the book. Some of you, I think, took
Festival of the Sea.
Festival of the Sea. That is in Japanese, but that was the original part of the book.
Are you ready? Okay. This is Dejima Island, the man-made island where all of the foreigners had to live down in Nagasaki.
And that's where Dutch interpreters
Interpreters.
were. Everything to do for Tokugawa Shogunate with a foreign country was conducted on this island. And 14 professional interpreters of Dutch were working in here. And this is a little bridge. They commuted to his Ranald MacDonald's jail cell. And they became Ronald's good friends too.
There. Yeah, that's the gate going into Dejima.
This is a recreation of the Dejima Island. Now, if you go to Japan and Nagasaki, if you have a chance, there's a recreation of the island. Oh, this is a monument of Ranald MacDonald. You know, this is the back side of it. But this house over here, supposedly that's where he was house arrest. That's where he taught English. It was a kind of a temple, but not. This is a current building. This is where all the buildings stood.
There. That's the front of the monument that you just saw from the back.
Yeah, but this used to be Ranald MacDonald's monument alone. But more than several years, maybe about 10 years ago, they built also his best student, Einosuke Moriyama's monument was built by Rotary Club of Nagasaki. This was also a Rotary Club of Nagasaki. And now they are together back again.
Oh, that's true. I'm going to read a little bit from the script. Moriyama and the 13 others, most of the 13 others, would come over to that house place where he was under house arrest every day to practice proper English instruction. But while MacDonald was teaching them English, he was learning Japanese. The first English-Japanese dictionary I ever saw was in Ranald MacDonald's handwriting. Of course, language is fluid, language evolves, language is what you hear, not what you see written down on the page. So his transcriptions of Japanese words were phonetic. But when Mas and I look through his writing and what's left of that little dictionary he made, it's astounding that, that's the word, I recognize that word. That's the one. He had an ear for languages. And we go back to, in the beginning, where he grew up in the forts, the Hudson Bay Company forts. There were people from every corner of the planet living there, speaking their own stuff. It was called the Babel of the Northwest, really. And the interpreters that came and saw him were curious about him. I mean, it's one thing to say, well, how do you say this word, or how do you write that word, or what does this thing mean? But they wanted to know about him personally. They wanted to know about whaling, how many ships were out there doing this thing. Ranald claimed at the time that he subtly tried to suggest that maybe Japan would be a good place to have ports of call. Maybe, we need fresh water, or we need stuff to eat, and maybe we can have a place, where we can get those things. And it was a vehement no, that's never going to happen. We're not going to do that. Sorry, can't do it. Moriyama was quoted to have said, no ship can approach the coast, no ship can enter the harbors. It is against the law. But while he was in confinement, he communicated daily with people of all kinds. They were always curious, sociable, friendly. And strangely enough, the authorities didn't place any kind of restraint on these visits. Whoever wanted to come and visit with him or stare at him through the, curtain or whatever, they were allowed to do so. In Fred Schott's book, Native American Land of the Shogun, it was written as a quote by Ranald, "I have never ceased to feel most kindly and ever grateful to my fellow men of Japan for their generous treatment of me. Throughout my whole sojourn of 10 months in that strange land, never did I receive a harsh word or even an unfriendly look. Of all the peoples I have met, both civilized and uncivilized, there are none to whom I feel more kindly, more grateful than my old hosts of Japan, and none of whom I esteem more highly." That was part of Ranald's deposition to the ship captain of the USS Preble that came to Japan to pick up a bunch of mutineers, the drunks and the women chasers that Moss was talking about. They had mutinied a ship. They had gone in, been confined. They broke out. They rearrested them. They were troublemakers, real troublemakers. And the U.S. government was told, hey, come get these guys. We don't want them here anymore. And there was a ship, the USS Preble, under the command of a guy named James Glynn, that came from Canton, China, with the mission of recovering the mutineers who were being held in confinement in Nagasaki. Not in the same place, but in Nagasaki. And the ship turned out to be Ranald's ticket back to the West. He didn't really want to leave, but he knew he had to leave. You want me to quit? Go ahead. No? You're good?
I may be stepping ahead of you.
There's your buddy. You can talk
Yeah,
about him. That's Einosuke Moriyama.
Right. And Ronald's best friend.
Best friend. Can you read it okay? Okay.
Anyway, I was going to say something, but
Go ahead.
Ronald never went back to Japan. And he died in the arm of his niece in Eastern Washington
You're really getting
at
ahead.
age 70. His last word was sayonara, my dear sayonara, to his niece. And he passed away at age 70.
Mas and I are jumping all over the place here. One thing that we want to point out is that Moriyama was the #1 guy for the Japanese government who was the translator between Commodore Perry and the Japanese government when Perry was trying to beat down the door of Japan. And to kind of give you an idea of what kind of relationship Moriyama and MacDonald had, one of the first things that Moriyama said to Commodore Perry was, "Do you know Ranald MacDonald?" They were solid friends. Solid friends. You ready to go? That's what I just read. None whom I esteem more highly. He had a great respect for Japanese culture, for the Japanese people. And it's been speculated that his deposition to the U.S. Navy on the way from Nagasaki to Macau, when he enthusiastically reinforced every chance he got that was really a neat place with neat people in it, the U.S. government figured, okay, we can go cherry pick that place. And pretty much, you know, that's what happened. That's the Black Fleet. There's one steamship only. That's Commodore Perry. Very stern-looking man. And as it said, Perry's mission effectively ended Japan's isolation. Oh, this is your favorite part. I'm going to say just a little bit more before we do that. Ronald got to Hong Kong on May 22nd of that same year, disembarked from the Preble. He said, I don't want to go back with you. I'm going to go find my own ship, do my own thing, go back and do. And Frederick Schott, who, again, the author of Native American, the Land of the Shogun, pointed out that had MacDonald chosen to return directly to North America with his account, with his deposition, he might have secured his place in history. Who was Ranald MacDonald? The man who opened Japan. But he didn't. He didn't go back right away. There were a bunch of newspaper articles written about him in the Hawaiian newspapers, but all of a sudden there was a civil war in the United States and they didn't care about that other stuff anymore. So it's like, you know, breaking news that lasts for 36 hours and now we're off to something new. It's always been that way, I think. He went to Australia, he mined for gold. He was there for a couple of years, and then he took a ship from Australia. It was going to go up to India, and the ship he was on was wrecked. He had to swim ashore. He lost all his stuff. As Fred said, for fear of his life through shark-infested waters, his knife in his belt. In the process, he lost all of his possessions except the clothes I had on and a little bundle, a handkerchief, containing, with other little precious things, only 5 pages of my notes on Japan. Ronald did not write his narrative, his autobiography, until a few years before he passed away. He had an incredible life between 1850 and 1890. He did prospect for gold. He found some, he lost some. He worked with his half-brothers to make a trucking company, a wagoneer company in southwest British Columbia. He was on the team that surveyed and documented geology, botany, whatever else you can think of, on the first Europeans to go to Vancouver Island to do that. And then he retired to Fort Colville, which is now underwater after they made, what is it, the Hoover Dam? Whatever the dam is on the Columbia River up there, flooded it. He returned to Western Canada about 2 months after his father had died. When Ronald first got off of the ship in the Sea of Japan to go over to Rishiri Island, and he swamped his boat to practice, he had left his sea chest open, unlocked, and a bunch of his stuff floated away. One of the things that floated away into the Sea of Japan was his rudder, which is the diary, the latitude, longitude, weather, whatever you can think of to document exactly where he was. Well, the next whaling ship that came after that happened, saw it floating in the water, picked it up, and it was reported to the MacDonald family, "I'm sorry, your son drowned in the Sea of Japan." They never knew. His stepbrother was still alive. Some of his brothers were still alive, but his dad didn't know. Basically, he just spent the rest of his time in British Columbia, like I said, working gold mines. He was known as courteous, mild-mannered, friendly, good-hearted, jolly, likable. He swore a lot. He was an entertaining talker who, my pages are sticking together. He liked to tell stories, and he liked to flirt. He apparently danced very well. It says occasionally people would interpret all of this as weakness, only to find out the hard way that Ranald MacDonald was as tough as they came. When necessary, he was a good rough and tumble fighter. There were several stories from his life on the rugged frontiers of the world where people did things like pulling knives on him, and then they would wake up a few hours later with a splitting headache, wondering what had happened. As Moss said, Ranald never did go back to Japan. He thought about it all the time. He talked about it probably to anybody who would listen. He wrote his autobiography, and the autobiography, 90% of it was about his trip to Japan. It left a deep impression on him, obviously. In 1894, sorry I transcribed numbers. In 1894, at the age of 70, he was living in Fort Colville in Washington State, and he got the flu. And word was sent to his niece, his brother's daughter. Her name was Jenny Lynch. She lived in Ferry County in a little town called Torota. She drove her wagon down to Colville, which was probably about 30 miles, 15, 20, 30 miles, a long way for a wagon to go. Put him in her wagon, took him back home, and he died in her arms. And he said, "Sayonara, my dear, sayonara." Let's see what I'm doing here. This is the actual, this is what he named it. This is what he entitled his book. This was the whole thing is the title of his book. Ranald MacDonald, A Narrative of His Early Life in the Columbia under the Hudson's Bay Company regime, of his experiences in the Pacific whale fishery, and of his great adventure to Japan, with a sketch of his later life on the western frontier. He decided to write that. Now, we're of two minds. There was a guy that wanted to edit this book for him too. And in the original manuscript, which we have copies of, you can tell this is Ranald's writing, and this is the other guy's writing. And this is what Ranald sounded like, and this is what the other guy sounded like. And I believe Ranald sounded far more eloquent than this guy who was a lawyer that thought he could edit a book. That's just me. We're back to that's the Rishiri Monument, that's the Nagasaki Monument, that's the Fort Astoria Birthplace Monument. And we'll get into that when we talk about how Friends of MacDonald. You want to talk about it now? No? Okay. All right. That's what it says on the Birthplace Monument. Birthplace of Ranald MacDonald, first guy to go to Japan, all of that stuff. I don't know how fast you guys can read. That's our founder. Huh? Are you going to talk about him? Go ahead.
Well, this was a picture of Mas Tomita. And he was the president of Epson, Portland, here in Hillsborough. And he was a scholar. He was sent to, I think, Cambridge University by Epson when he first went to work for him. And then he was very curious about the history of this area. And he knew about Ranald MacDonald.
Because
But
he knew about Ranald MacDonald. He had written the book in Japanese in Japan, Festival of the Sea, the one that we had, the blue one over there that was translated into English.
but he knew of Fort George, not Fort Astoria. Fort George was before Fort of Astoria became a fort. And Mr. Tomita was wondering, where's the Fort George in Oregon when he came here to head the Epson Portland Inc. And then he found out, go ahead and talk about
Found
Bruce.
out. Oh, okay. Well, there.
Yeah.
That's his cohort, Bruce Burney. Bruce Burney was, when he met Mas Tomita, a librarian in Astoria. And they were purging books, and one of the books they purged was the original narrative. And Bruce said, you know, boy, this is a crazy story, I think, you know. In the meantime, and this is Bruce's own words, in 1988, Mas Tomita, who was then 40 years old and president of Epson Portland Inc., had, along with his family, come to Oregon to build a major industrial plant in Beaverton. He was a marvel at organization and picked talented people to help him. He had read Festival of the Sea, and by 1988, Tomita was actively collecting everything he could lay his hands on about MacDonald. He was stumped, though, because this place called Fort George was given as MacDonald's birthplace, and he couldn't find the name on any Oregon maps. The director of the Astoria Public Library from 67 to 97 was named Bruce Burney. He was also inspired by MacDonald's story. In 72, he happened upon a copy of the narrative book. He thought Astoria should have a birthplace monument. You know, why not have, just like putting Ronald's name on the frieze in the Capitol building. The guy was from here, he did great things, let's recognize that. Your turn now?
All right.
Okay.
So Bruce went to Japanese consulate for perhaps donation of funding to create a monument in Astoria about Ranald MacDonald. And Japanese consulate referred to a group called the Shokokai, it's a Japanese businessmen's group in Portland area. The members were NEC, Epson, Fujitsu, and so forth. And Mr. Tomita was one of the board members of Shokokai. And that's when he found out about Fort George being Fort Astoria, the same thing. And then he became very enthusiastic, and he met with Bruce Burney, and then started negotiation. We're talking about organizing a Friends of MacDonald, and he himself became first chairman of the Friends of MacDonald, and Bruce became vice chairman of the Friends of MacDonald.
There. This is the first group of foreign students from Rishiri Island that came to homestay in Astoria,
Is,
2013.
yeah, this is a principal of Rishiri High School brought 2 boys to Astoria for the first time. And now they have a sign saying Port Astoria instead of Fort George, which is the same thing.
Well, Fort George was owned by the Northwest Company, which was British, and Fort Astoria was Hudson's Bay Company, which didn't want to be anybody know they were British, and I believe the Hudson Bay Company kind of absorbed the Northwest Company and then became Fort Astoria. And by the way, John Astor never set foot in Oregon. But he had a lot of money, so, you know how that goes. Are you done with that one?
Yeah.
Here we go.
This is Ranald MacDonald's 200th birthday celebration. And we decided to have a postage stamp.
You're sitting on it. You're sitting on it.
And anyway, there was an attempt to create a postage stamp of Ranald MacDonald.
Bruce Burney wanted to do.
But Bruce wanted, but he was told no foreigners' name in a face can be on a Japanese postage stamp. But then found out later there were a couple.
There were a couple of postage stamps, but they had Dutch people on them.
Right. So there were some, foreign face on the. So I went to Consul General, and they gave me Japanese
Postal Service.
Postal Service office phone number. So I dialed the number, and I talked to them about possibility of having a postage stamp of Ranald MacDonald. And then it went on just no problem. So we have created, I think, 84 yen postage stamp, which was normal. We couldn't do it in United States, but in Japan we could print the postage stamp. And the only thing is that as soon as we printed the postage stamp, the Japanese Postal Service office raised the price.
So nobody wanted it anymore.
No. It's not nobody wanted. They wanted, but they had to put more stamps than,
Yeah.
Yeah, so only 6 months later, they raised the price of the.
But
So,
anyway, that's a blow up of the stamp.
yeah, but there are many, collectors too, and this stamp can be still used in Japan.
In Japan.
You have to add a little more, stamp on it. But
If anybody is interested, we still have a few sheets left too. You can,
we've been selling for $15
yeah,
per
for like
20 stamps. 20 stamps is a sheet, and so anyway, yeah, this is the whole picture. 84 yen, 84, and it's a Japanese Postal Service. And by the way, this is Chinook Indian design, but whole stamp design Alice did. Yeah.
A smattering of applause.
Okay.
Wait, here. Okay, we're almost done.
Yeah,
There.
yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, you want, go ahead. Okay, this is a gentleman, Fred Schott, who wrote the book Native American Land of the Shogun. And this is Ronald's headstone in Toyota. You can see at the bottom of it, somebody left him a can of Coke. But all of those rocks, I don't think at this particular time there were rocks from Rishiri left there. Were there already? I don't know what year this was taken, honey. These are the words that are on his headstone. I think you can read them from there. And I will have to say, this guy, Fred Schott, he is my mentor, my hero. He probably knows more about MacDonald than anybody on the planet. His research is ironclad, and he's a really, really nice man. He lives down in Oakland.
He was recognized by Japanese government and for spreading the manga culture,
Cartoon books.
cartoon book
Yeah.
throughout the world, not just Japan. And because when he was in Japan, he worked for creator of Atom Boy. It's a manga called the Atom Boy, and it's very famous. And he was interpreter, translator, and whenever the creator went outside of Japan, he went along and acted as his assistant. And he's been recognized by Japanese government, and he received one of the highest award as
Rising Sun. Yeah.
Spread the manga culture throughout the world.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Wait.
Thank
I'm going to say one more thing before Mako speaks. This is our webpage. You can go to our webpage. It's www.friendsofmacdonald, all one word, .com. We have a search engine. We have archives. We have anything you can think of. Go ahead and check us out.
Okay, I've been told by the authorities that it's time to close up, but the hobbies are willing to stay and talk if you want to come up later. But there's no time left for questions and answers unless you come up and ask them personally. Thank you so much to both of you.